The mountain man's declaration echoed through the auction hall, silencing the crowd as he claimed the labor girl as his own. His words were as harsh as the wilderness he called home, yet they held a promise that would change both their lives forever. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The bitter February wind cut through Anna Mae's thin cotton dress as she shivered atop the crude wooden platform. Elk Creek's auction block had seen many sales, but today it held a young woman whose crime was merely inheriting her father's debts. Samuel Briggs yanked her forward by the arm, his fingers digging into her flesh with enough force to leave purple marks by nightfall. The overseer's face twisted with satisfaction as he displayed his prize to the gathered townsfolk. "Next up for indenture," bellowed the auctioneer, a portly man whose breath clouded in the frigid air. "Anna Mae Wilson, daughter of the late Thomas Wilson, owes $234 in outstanding debts, plus interest." He circled Anna like a predator, pointing out her features as though she were livestock. "Healthy enough for housework, cooking, and whatever else you might require." Anna's gaze remained fixed on the muddy ground. She knew those debts were forgeries, papers Briggs had produced within days of her father's burial. The farm, her inheritance, and now her freedom, all stolen through a stroke of his pen. Her heart hammered against her ribs as whispers rippled through the crowd. "$20, called a red-faced farmer whose reputation for cruelty matched his sour expression. "$25, countered a widow seeking household help. The bids trickled slowly upward, each one determining which new master would claim her labor, her time, her dignity. Anna's fingers trembled, not just from cold, but from the terrible knowledge that her fate hung on these callous transactions. A disturbance at the edge of the gathering drew her attention. The crowd parted like water around a stone as a towering figure moved forward. Jedediah Harper's massive frame dwarfed those around him, his bearded face partially hidden beneath a worn leather hat. The trapper rarely came to town, preferring the solitude of his mountain cabin to Elk Creek's gossip and commerce. Silence fell as the mountain man approached the auction block. Without speaking, he reached into his coat and produced a single silver dollar, placing it deliberately on the wooden platform. The metal caught the weak winter sunlight, gleaming with quiet defiance. "You're sleeping with me now," Jedediah announced, his voice low but carrying across the hushed square. Gasps and murmurs erupted. Anna's eyes widened in fear, but something in the trapper's steady gaze made her pause. There was no lust there, no cruelty, only a calm determination that somehow steadied her racing pulse. $1, Briggs sputtered, his face reddening. "The girl's worth—" "More than you've ever been," Jedediah interrupted, offering his calloused hand to Anna. "Your choice, miss, my cabin or his ledger." In that moment, Anna recognized the choice for what it was, not between two masters, but between continued bondage and something that might, against all odds, resemble freedom. "She ain't for your bed," Jedediah Harper's voice rumbled across the auction block, silencing the murmurs that had begun to spread through the crowd. "She's for her own freedom." His words hung in the frigid air of Elk Creek's town center, causing gasps to ripple through the onlookers who had gathered to witness Anna's humiliation. Samuel Briggs's face contorted with fury, his knuckles whitening around his walking stick. "You've no right," the overseer sputtered, spittle flying from his lips. "The girl's debts are legal and binding." Jed stood unmoved, a mountain against Briggs's storm. "She'll be under my roof, fed at my fire, and protected by my rifle." His voice carried no threat, only certainty. "Any man who says different can speak to me directly." The crowd parted as Jedediah reached up to help Anna Mae down from the auction block. His scarred hand, rough from years of trapping in the wilderness, was surprisingly gentle as it closed around her trembling fingers. Anna noticed the contrast immediately. Where Briggs had gripped to control, Jed supported to steady. "Can you ride?" he asked softly, his eyes meeting hers with quiet respect, rather than the dominance she'd grown accustomed to from men in Elk Creek. Anna nodded, though she wasn't entirely certain her legs would carry her even the few steps to his waiting mule. Her knees threatened to buckle with each step, trembling from both exhaustion and the overwhelming shock of her sudden change in fortune. "Moses is steady," Jed assured her, guiding her toward the aging mule that stood patiently at the edge of the crowd. "He won't let you fall." The townspeople watched in stunned silence as the solitary trapper and the indentured servant made their way through their midst. Women whispered behind gloved hands while men shifted uncomfortably, uncertain whether to admire or condemn Harper's unexpected act of mercy. The February wind cut sharper as they reached Moses, and Anna couldn't suppress a violent shiver that ran through her thin cotton dress. Without hesitation, Jed shrugged off his heavy coat and draped it over her shoulders. The warmth of the garment enveloped her immediately, carrying the scents of pine, wood smoke, and the mountains themselves. "Thank you," she whispered, her first word since being yanked onto the auction block earlier that morning. The trapper nodded once, his expression unreadable as he helped her onto Moses's back. As they began their journey away from the town center, Anna clutched the edges of Jed's coat tighter around herself, finding more comfort in its rough warmth than in any shelter she'd known since her father's death. Behind them, the stairs of Elk Creek's residents followed their departure, judgment and curiosity mingling in equal measure. The mule's steady rhythm carried Anna May away from Elk Creek, each hoof fall marking distance from the auction block where her life had changed forever. Moses trudged upward along a narrow trail, his broad back swaying beneath her. Anna clutched the saddle horn with trembling fingers, the oversized coat Jedediah had draped over her shoulders smelling of pine sap and wood smoke. Behind her rode the mountain man himself, silent as the gathering dusk. Anna wanted to thank him, to ask why he'd intervened, but the words stuck in her throat. The enormity of what had happened, being sold like cattle, then suddenly rescued by this scarred giant, left her mind reeling. She'd heard whispers about Harper in town, a loner, dangerous perhaps, but fair. Now she was alone with him, heading into wilderness. "You warm enough?" Jed's deep voice startled her. When she nodded, he fell silent again, seemingly content with the quiet. The trail steepened as they ascended. Wind whispered through the pines, carrying the first flakes of snow. Anna shivered despite the heavy coat. Below them, Elk Creek diminished, its buildings, its judgmental stares, and Samuel Briggs's cruel grip all growing smaller with each switchback they climbed. Darkness gathered beneath the trees. Anna's exhaustion, held at bay by fear and uncertainty, now threatened to overcome her. Her body, weakened by months of Briggs's meager rations and hard labor, swayed dangerously in the saddle. "Steady now," Jed murmured, moving his mount closer. "Another hour to the cabin. Can you hold on that long?" "Yes," Anna whispered, though she wasn't certain. The snow fell harder now, collecting on the shoulders of Jed's coat and dusting Moses' mane with white. They climbed in silence as stars appeared between snow clouds. Anna's thoughts drifted to her father. What would he think of her situation? Being purchased by a mountain trapper seemed like leaping from fire into unknown waters. Yet something about Jedediah's quiet dignity gave her hope. The trail leveled somewhat, winding through a stand of aspen trees whose bare branches rattled in the wind. Anna's eyelids grew heavy, her grip on the saddle loosening. Just as she began to slip sideways, a strong hand steadied her. "Almost there," the trapper said, his voice gentler than she'd expected from such a formidable man. Each step carried them higher into the mountains and further from captivity. The town's lights now just distant pinpricks in the valley below. Whatever awaited her at Jed's cabin, Anna knew one thing with certainty. She was no longer property to be sold. That single silver dollar had purchased not ownership, but a chance at freedom she'd thought forever lost. The small cabin emerged from the darkness like a beacon, nestled against the mountainside as if the mountain itself had grown it there. Smoke curled from the stone chimney in lazy spirals, and golden lamplight spilled through the single window, promising warmth within. Anna May's shoulders relaxed slightly at the sight, though exhaustion had nearly claimed her during the final mile of their journey. Jedediah Harper dismounted first, his movements efficient despite his size. He helped Anna down from Moses with surprising gentleness, his scarred hands steady as her legs threatened to buckle beneath her. "Home," he said simply, the word hanging in the cold mountain air between them. Inside, the cabin was small but meticulously ordered. Dried herbs hung from the rafters in neat bundles, rosemary, sage, and plants Anna couldn't name. A pot of stew simmered over the fire, filling the single room with a rich aroma that made her empty stomach clench painfully. Against the far wall stood a narrow bed with a patchwork quilt smoothed carefully across it, the fabric worn but clean. The trapper moved about the space with practiced ease, hanging his coat on a peg by the door and stoking the fire. Anna remained frozen near the entrance, uncertain of her place in this strange new world, until Jed gestured toward the room's only chair. "Sit," he said, the gruffness in his voice softened by something that might have been concern. "You look ready to fall." When she was seated, Jedediah knelt before the fire, his massive frame casting long shadows across the wooden floor. He poured water from a kettle into a basin, testing it with one finger before placing it near her feet. "For washing," he explained, not meeting her eyes. "When you're ready." He stood then, towering in the small space, and cleared his throat. "You'll work alongside me here," he said carefully, as if choosing each word with deliberation. "Not as property, as an equal. You're free under this roof." The simple dignity of his declaration, so different from Samuel Briggs's cruel ownership, brought unexpected tears to Anna's eyes. She hadn't heard such decency since her father's death. "Why?" she whispered, the question she'd been holding since the auction block finally escaping. Jedediah Harper looked at her directly then, his weathered face solemn in the firelight. "Because no person should own another," he said. "Not ever." He turned away, giving her privacy with her emotions, and began ladling stew into a wooden bowl. The mountain man's broad shoulders seemed to carry a story of their own, but tonight Anna was too exhausted to ask. For now, it was enough to know she was safe, warm, and, for the first time in months, treated like a human being. The rich aroma of venison stew filled the small cabin as Anna May stared at the steaming bowl Jedediah Harper placed before her. Her hands trembled slightly as she accepted the wooden spoon, the weight of it unfamiliar after months of scraps eaten with her fingers at the overseer's property. The first spoonful nearly brought tears to her eyes. Real meat, vegetables from Jed's root cellar, and herbs that gave the simple meal a flavor that seemed almost decadent after so long without proper nourishment. "Eat slow," Jed cautioned, his voice gentle as he settled across from her at the rough-hewn table. "Your stomach needs time." He didn't hover or watch her eat, instead busying himself with mending a trap, giving her the dignity of a meal without scrutiny. Anna nodded gratefully, forcing herself to savor each bite, rather than devour it like the starving girl she was. The mountain man had already shown more kindness than she'd known since her father's passing. When the bowl was empty, she felt truly full for the first time in memory. As darkness settled completely outside, Jed moved about the cabin with practiced efficiency. He unrolled a thick blanket near the fireplace, arranging it with care. "The bed's yours," he said, nodding toward the narrow frame with its carefully smoothed quilt. "I'll sleep here by the fire." "But it's your home," Anna began to protest. "And you're my guest," he interrupted firmly, but not unkindly. He gestured toward a screen in the corner. "There's clean water behind there. You can wash in privacy." Behind the simple wooden screen, Anna found a basin of warmed water and a sliver of soap that smelled faintly of pine. She scrubbed away layers of grime, wincing as the water revealed bruises from Samuel Briggs's rough handling. The simple act of cleanliness felt like reclaiming something precious that had been stolen. When she emerged, Jed had already settled on his blanket, his back turned toward her to offer privacy. His coat, the one he'd draped over her shoulders in town, lay across the foot of the bed. The wind picked up outside, howling around the eaves of the cabin as Anna slipped beneath the quilt, drawing his coat over her shoulders. The garment carried the scent of pine and smoke, somehow comforting in its roughness. "You're safe here," came his voice from the fire, steady and certain in the darkness. Anna closed her eyes, listening to the crackle of flames and the distant cry of a night bird. For the first time since her father died, she felt no fear of what morning might bring. A small spark of hope flickered in her heart, fragile as a candle flame, but stubbornly persistent against the night. Anna May woke to the unfamiliar scent of cooking oats and the gentle clanking of cast iron. Sunlight streamed through the cabin's single window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. For a moment, disorientation gripped her, then yesterday's events came rushing back: the auction block, the silver dollar, Jedediah Harper's unexpected intervention. She sat up slowly, her body aching from months of hard labor under Samuel Briggs's cruel supervision. The trapper stood at the small iron stove, his broad back to her as he stirred something in a pot. Anna clutched the quilt tighter, uncertain of her place in this strange new arrangement. "You hungry?" Jed asked without turning, his voice low and gravelly from disuse. "Yes, sir," she whispered, the habits of servitude still ingrained. The mountain man turned then, his weathered face unreadable. "No sir here, just Jed." He gestured to the rough-hewn table with his wooden spoon. "Food's ready when you are." Anna slipped from the bed, still wearing yesterday's thin dress beneath his heavy coat. She approached the table cautiously, like a wild creature uncertain of kindness. Jed placed a steaming bowl before her, simple oats sweetened with a drizzle of honey. "Eat," he encouraged, sitting across from her with his own portion. "Day's work needs strength." They ate in silence, the only sounds the scrape of spoons against bowls and the occasional pop from the fireplace. When they finished, Jed stood and collected their dishes. "Today," he announced, "you learn the cabin." The morning unfolded in a series of lessons. Jed showed her how to draw water from the nearby spring, demonstrating how to break ice from its surface during winter months. He taught her to split kindling, not the larger logs yet. Those would come later when her strength returned. The mule, Moses, regarded her with suspicious eyes until Jed showed her how to approach with an apple core held flat on her palm. "He's particular," the trapper explained, as the animal's velvety lips tickled her hand. "Like most of us up here." By midday, Anna's hands were red and beginning to blister. She had spent months laboring under Briggs, but these were different motions, different muscles. Still, she persisted without complaint, determined to prove herself useful. Jed noticed her raw palms as she struggled with the water bucket. Without comment, he disappeared into the cabin, returning with a small tin of salve. "Here," he said, offering it to her. "Won't help you avoid calluses, but might ease the way to getting them." Anna accepted the tin, their fingers brushing briefly. "Thank you," she said, the words encompassing more than just the salve. The mountain man nodded once, understanding in his eyes. "You'll manage," he said simply. "Just takes time." In that moment, standing in the crisp mountain air with the weight of Briggs's cruelty beginning to lift from her shoulders, Anna allowed herself to believe him. The woodpile grew steadily as Anna May split logs with increasing confidence. Her hands, once soft from indoor work, were developing calluses, badges of her new independence. Between the rhythmic thwacks of the axe, fragments of her story emerged like splinters from the wood. "Pa's farm wasn't much," she said, pausing to wipe her brow, "but it was ours, 20 acres with that creek running through the south corner." Her voice softened as she described the small homestead where she'd grown up, the veins of silver ore her father had discovered just months before his passing. Jedediah nodded, his scarred hands working methodically as he repaired a broken trap. "Your father was a good man," he offered quietly. "Met him once at the trading post." Anna's eyes widened at this connection to her past. "Then you know he wasn't one to leave debts." Her voice hardened as she described the day after the funeral, Samuel Briggs appearing at their door with papers claiming her father owed him more than the land was worth. "He gave me a choice," she continued, her grip tightening on the axe handle. "Work off the debt or lose everything immediately." Jed's face darkened as he examined the trap's mechanism. "Briggs has done this before," he said, his voice low and controlled. "Those papers, the handwriting, the way he structures the debt, I've seen it when he took the Miller place 3 years back." Anna set down her axe, the weight of this revelation settling over her. "You think he forged them?" "Know it," the trapper replied simply. "Man's built his fortune on other folks' misfortune." They worked in silence for several minutes, the implications hanging between them like the gathering clouds overhead. The first snowflakes began to drift down, delicate against the darkening sky. "We should finish up," Jed said, glancing upward. "Storm's coming." As they gathered the wood and tools, Anna felt something shift inside her, anger giving way to determination. If Briggs had forged those documents, perhaps there was a way to prove it, to reclaim what was rightfully hers. Inside the cabin, as the short winter day surrendered to darkness, Jed stoked the fire while Anna prepared a simple stew. The mountain man's quiet presence offered a comfort she hadn't known since her father died. They ate by firelight, planning tomorrow's tasks, speaking of practical things while deeper currents ran beneath their words. When Jed finally unrolled his blanket by the hearth, Anna realized that for the first time since Briggs had appeared at her door, she felt something beyond mere survival, a fragile, tentative hope taking root, as persistent as the tiny seedlings her father had once taught her to protect against the frost. A week passed in the mountain cabin, each day bringing Anna May a stronger sense of purpose. Her hands, once soft from indoor work, now bore the calluses of honest labor. Jedediah Harper rarely spoke, but his approving nods when she correctly split kindling or drew water from the spring meant more than flowery praise ever could. "You're learning fast," he commented one evening as they sat by the fire. The trapper's rough voice, used so sparingly, made his words feel like precious gifts. Their evenings fell into a comforting pattern. Sometimes Jed would read aloud from his worn Bible, fingers tracing the faded text with surprising gentleness. Other nights, Anna would sing hymns her father had taught her, her clear voice filling the cabin while her protector listened, eyes closed in. Appreciation. "My pa loved this one," she explained one night, turning pages in the old hymnal she'd managed to keep through her ordeal. The familiar melodies seemed to soften the mountain man's weathered features. On the 8th morning, as frost painted delicate patterns across the cabin windows, the sound of approaching hoofbeats broke their peaceful routine. Jed reached instinctively for his rifle, positioning himself between Anna and the door. Will Turner's breathless arrival brought their fragile peace crashing down. The messenger dismounted, hat in hand, reluctance evident in his posture. "Briggs has gone to the sheriff," Will announced, avoiding Anna's eyes. "Says the girl is his rightful property. Says you stole what belongs to him, Jed." Anna's stomach twisted into a painful knot. The overseer wasn't giving up so easily. She should have known his pride wouldn't allow it. "He's filed formal charges," Will continued, shifting uncomfortably. "Sheriff's giving folks notice. Says if you don't bring her back within the week, there'll be a posse." Jed's expression remained impassive, but Anna noticed how his scarred hands tightened around the rifle. "Briggs has no claim on her," he stated flatly. "Maybe not in God's eyes," Will replied, "but he's got papers with signatures, and he's got the ear of Judge Harrison." After the messenger departed, silence hung heavy in the cabin. Anna's hard-won sense of security evaporated like morning mist. The law itself, manipulated by Samuel Briggs's influence and money, now threatened the safety she'd found in these mountains. "I should go," she whispered, tears threatening. "You've done enough. I won't bring trouble to your door." Jed turned to her, his usually stoic face set with determination. "You're not going anywhere," he said firmly. "Not back to him, not ever." Anna May paced the cabin floor, her hands trembling as she folded and refolded Jedediah's spare shirt. 3 days had passed since Will Turner had ridden up to their door with news that made her blood run cold. "Briggs is claiming theft of property," Jed explained, his voice low and controlled despite the fury in his eyes. "He's telling the sheriff you're still indentured to him by law." "I should leave," Anna whispered, tears threatening to spill. "Go north, perhaps. I never meant to bring this trouble to your door." The mountain man shook his head firmly, his scarred hands gentle as they stilled her nervous movements. "You're not property to be stolen, and you're not running anywhere alone." Outside, the late winter wind howled through the pines, matching the storm of fear in Anna's heart. The thought of facing Samuel Briggs again made her physically ill. The overseer's influence reached deep into Elk Creek's power structures. Even the law might bend to his will. "What if the sheriff believes him?" she asked, voice barely audible. "What if they take me back?" Jed's expression hardened as he reached for his rifle, checking its mechanism with practiced hands. "They won't," he said simply. "We have truth on our side." Anna watched him prepare Moses for the journey, securing supplies and checking the mule's hooves with methodical care. The trapper's quiet confidence steadied her, though doubt still gnawed at her resolve. "I've brought nothing but hardship since you bought me," she said, wrapping her shawl tighter against the cold. Jed paused, looking at her directly. "I didn't buy you, Anna May. I paid to free you. There's a world of difference." His words warmed something deep within her, a small flame of dignity that Samuel Briggs had nearly extinguished. She straightened her spine and nodded. "We'll face him together, then." As they prepared to leave, Anna tucked her father's journal inside her dress. If they needed proof of Briggs's deceit, perhaps some answer lay within those pages. The journey down the mountain loomed before them, each step bringing them closer to confrontation. Anna's fear remained, a constant companion, but something else grew alongside it: determination. The overseer had taken her home, her father, and nearly her freedom. She would not let him take this new life too. "Whatever happens in town," Jed said as he helped her mount Moses, "remember you're not alone anymore." Anna nodded, drawing strength from his steady presence beside her. Together, they turned toward the trail leading down to Elk Creek, ready to face whatever justice or injustice awaited them there. The journey back to Elk Creek felt like walking into a lion's den. Anna May clutched the edge of her borrowed shawl as Moses carried them down the mountain path. Every hoofbeat brought them closer to judgment, and she could feel Jedediah's tension beside her, his broad shoulders squared against what was to come. As they entered town, windows opened and faces appeared. Children were hushed, women whispered behind hands, and men stared with open hostility. "The trapper and his purchase," someone muttered, loud enough to be heard. Anna felt her face burn with shame, but Jed's steady presence beside her kept her chin up. Sheriff Dawkins received them with cold formality. The lawman barely looked at Anna as he explained their predicament. "Briggs has filed legal papers claiming theft of property and breach of contract," he said, tapping yellowed documents with his finger. "You've got 3 weeks to prove these debts are forgeries, or the girl returns to her rightful owner." "She belongs to no one," Jed's voice rumbled, low and dangerous. "Anna May is a free woman." The sheriff shrugged. "Not according to these papers." After leaving the sheriff's office, they headed to the general store for supplies. Anna could feel eyes following her every move as she selected fabric for mending. Mrs. Peterson, the storekeeper's wife, deliberately moved away when Anna approached the counter, as if proximity might contaminate her. "She stealing that too, Harper?" a voice called from the corner where 3 men played cards. "Or just paying in trade?" Before Anna could shrink away, Jedediah set down a sack of flour with deliberate care. The mountain man turned slowly, his scarred face impassive but his eyes burning. "This woman has more dignity in her little finger than you have in your entire miserable life, Turner," he said quietly. "Speak of her with respect, or don't speak at all." The silence that followed was absolute. Anna watched as the townspeople shifted uncomfortably, unable to meet Jed's steady gaze or her own. As they loaded their purchases onto Moses, Anna felt something shift inside her. The weight of others' judgment seemed lighter somehow, balanced against the unexpected gift of Jed's defense. "Thank you," she whispered as they left town behind, the afternoon sun warming their backs. Jed nodded once, his profile strong against the mountain backdrop. Truth needs no thanks. They rode in companionable silence, the town's whispers fading with distance. For the first time since her father died, Anna felt not just safe but valued. Whatever came next, they would face it together, with renewed purpose and the quiet dignity Jed had helped her reclaim. The mountain winds howled as Anna May and Jedediah returned to the cabin, their journey from Elk Creek having left them both physically and emotionally drained. The sheriff's words hung heavy in the air between them. 3 weeks to prove Briggs's forgery or face the consequences. "I've brought nothing but trouble," Anna whispered as she hung her threadbare shawl by the door. Her fingers trembled slightly as she moved to stoke the dying embers in the fireplace. "Samuel will never stop until he has me back in chains or worse." Jed's large frame blocked the lantern light as he set down his rifle and removed his worn leather boots. "You're no trouble, Anna. He paused, searching for words that didn't come easily to a man accustomed to silence. "You're a blessing to this place." The young woman looked up in surprise, her eyes reflecting the growing firelight. Before her arrival, dust had settled on every surface of the cabin. Now, dried herbs hung from the rafters, the quilt was neatly folded each morning, and the solitary existence Jed had carved out for himself had transformed into something resembling a home. "I've never seen this cabin so alive," he continued, his voice low and steady. "Before you came, I'd go days without speaking a word." Outside, wolves called to one another across the valley, their mournful cries echoing the dangers that lurked beyond the cabin walls. Anna shivered involuntarily. "They won't come near," Jed assured her, misreading her fear. "Not with smoke from our chimney." It's not the wolves that frighten me, she admitted, thinking of Briggs and his cruel eyes. The trapper nodded, understanding without words. He moved to the window, scanning the darkness before drawing the simple burlap curtain. Whatever comes, we'll face it together. Anna busied herself preparing a simple meal from their dwindling supplies. The routine of domestic tasks had become a comfort, so different from the backbreaking labor under Briggs's watchful eye. The town may whisper, Jed said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence between them. But what we're building here is honest. Remember that. Anna felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the crackling fire. For the first time since her father's death, she belonged somewhere. The overseer might threaten, the townspeople might judge, but within these rough-hewn walls she had found something precious. I never thought I'd feel safe again, she confessed, her voice barely audible above the wind's moan. Jed's scarred hand briefly touched her shoulder, a gesture so gentle from hands so strong. Neither did I, he admitted. In that moment, as wolves howled and dangers gathered, Anna realized they were saving each other. The morning frost crunched under Anna May's boots as Jedediah Harper demonstrated how to split kindling with a clean, powerful stroke. Her first attempts sent wood chips flying wildly, but by midday she had developed a rhythm that made the trapper nod with approval. Your hands will toughen, Jed said, noticing her wincing as she flexed her blistered palms. Give them time. Anna smiled, examining the calluses already forming. These were honest marks, unlike the bruises Briggs had left on her wrists. Each day brought new lessons, setting snares for rabbits, identifying edible plants, and today, handling Jed's rifle. Stand firm, he instructed, positioning her shoulders as she aimed at a distant pine knot. Breathe out slow when you squeeze the trigger. The weapon felt impossibly heavy, but Anna steadied herself, remembering how her father had once shown her similar patience. When she finally fired, the recoil nearly knocked her backward, but her shot struck close to the mark. You're a natural, the mountain man said, his rare smile warming her more than the winter sun. That evening, as snow began to fall outside their cabin, Anna unpacked the small bundle of possessions she'd managed to save from her father's farm. Among threadbare dresses and a worn hymnal lay a leather-bound journal she hadn't opened since his passing. What's that? Jed asked, setting down his coffee. Father's journal, she replied, carefully turning the brittle pages. He recorded everything about our land. As Anna read aloud, her voice grew stronger with each page. The journal detailed boundary markers, water rights, and most significantly, mineral deposits along the creek that bordered their property near Elk Creek. Jed's expression changed as he listened. Anna, do you understand what this means? She looked up, confusion crossing her face. Silver. Or, he explained, kneeling beside her chair, that parcel Briggs claimed through those forged papers, it's valuable. That's why he wanted your land so badly. The realization washed over Anna like ice water. My inheritance. Your salvation, Jed corrected, his scarred hand gently covering hers. If we can prove your claim. Anna clutched the journal to her chest, hope and determination replacing the resignation she'd carried for months. The overseer hadn't just stolen her freedom, he'd stolen her birthright. We'll need more than just this book, the trapper cautioned, but his eyes held a fierce resolve that matched her own. But it's a beginning. That night, as wind howled around their mountain shelter, Anna traced her father's handwriting by lamplight. The land that had seemed lost forever might yet be reclaimed, not just as property, but as justice against the man who had tried to own her soul. The morning dawned crisp and clear as Anna May and Jedediah Harper set out toward the creek parcel that had once belonged to her father. Moses trudged steadily beneath them, his hooves crunching through patches of lingering snow. Anna clutched her father's journal tightly against her chest, its worn leather cover a tangible connection to the past she was fighting to reclaim. There, she whispered as they crested a small rise. I remember that bent oak. Her voice trembled with emotion as childhood memories flooded back, her father showing her the boundary stones, explaining how the water rights worked, pointing out the glittering specks in the creek bed that he said might someday be their fortune. Jed dismounted first, his large frame moving with surprising grace as he helped Anna down. Together they walked the perimeter, finding the carved stone markers exactly where her father's journal had indicated. The trapper knelt by the creek, sifting the gravelly soil through his scarred fingers, nodding as tiny metallic flecks caught the sunlight. "Silver," he confirmed, his usually stoic expression softening at the hope blooming across Anna's face. "Your father wasn't wrong. This land is worth fighting for." Anna ran her fingers over moss-covered boundary stones, reconnecting with the property that rightfully belonged to her. "He used to bring me here on Sundays after church," she said softly. "He'd tell me that someday this would secure my future." They spent hours documenting everything, measuring distances between markers, sketching the creek's course, collecting small samples of ore-rich soil. Each piece of evidence strengthened their case against Briggs and his fraudulent claims. As dusk approached, they returned to the cabin, tired but filled with renewed purpose. The small structure felt truly like home now, warmed by shared struggle and growing trust. After a simple supper of rabbit stew, Anna retrieved her father's hymnal from her few possessions. Her clear voice rose in amazing grace, filling the cabin with melody. To her surprise, Jed's deep bass joined in, rough but true. His eyes remained fixed on the fire, as if embarrassed by this revelation of softness, but he didn't stop singing. When the last notes faded, Anna carefully placed the journal on the table between them. "This is our weapon," she said with quiet determination. The mountain man nodded, his calloused hand briefly covering hers. "And your inheritance," he added, "not just the land or the silver, but your father's dream for you." Outside, an owl called into the gathering darkness. Inside, two people who had found unexpected alliance prepared to face whatever challenges tomorrow would bring, the leather-bound journal between them, a bridge connecting past injustice to future possibility. The morning dawned crisp and clear as Jedediah Harper laid out his plan over breakfast. "Reverend Cole has been in Elk Creek longer than most," he explained, his voice low and measured. "He's witnessed most land transactions and marriages in these parts. If anyone can vouch for your father's signature, it would be him." Anna May nodded, clutching her father's leather-bound journal. The worn pages contained not just memories, but their best hope for justice. "Do you think he'll help us?" she asked, remembering the mixed reactions they had received in town. "The Reverend's a fair man," Jed replied, reaching for his coat. "Unlike Briggs, he values truth above convenience." They set out on Moses, the faithful mule plodding steadily down the mountain path. Anna held tight to Jed's waist, the journal secured inside her shawl. The trapper's broad back shielded her from the wind as they descended toward Elk Creek, where white steeples pierced the sky. The parsonage sat behind the church, a modest white house with blue shutters and smoke curling from the chimney. Reverend Cole himself answered their knock, his kind eyes widening in surprise. "Jedediah, Miss Anna," he exclaimed, "please come in from the cold." Inside, Mrs. Cole bustled about, setting out tea and biscuits while her husband listened intently to their story. Anna's voice trembled as she recounted her father's death and Briggs's deception, but grew stronger as she described finding the journal and discovering the truth about her inheritance. "May I?" the Reverend asked, extending his hand for the journal. He examined the handwriting, nodding slowly. "I witnessed your father sign the deed to this property 15 years ago. This is undoubtedly his hand." Jed leaned forward. "We need to prove Briggs forged the debt papers. Can you help us?" Reverend Cole stroked his beard thoughtfully. "The county keeps records of all legal transactions, and Henry Red Elk, the Ute scout who helped survey these lands, still visits town monthly." He reached for paper and pen. "We'll need affidavits from those who knew your father, Anna, and samples of his handwriting to compare against Briggs's forgeries." Cole squeezed Anna's hand. "Samuel Briggs has bullied folks too long. It's time someone stood against him." As they planned their strategy, Anna felt hope blossoming. The Reverend would gather testimony from townsfolk who'd witnessed her father's signature. Jed would track down Henry Red Elk for confirmation of the boundary markers. "The judge arrives next Tuesday," Reverend Cole said. "We have 1 week to build our case." When they finally rose to leave, the clergyman placed his hand on Anna's shoulder. "Your father was an honest man. We won't let his memory, or his daughter, be stolen by fraud." Riding back toward the mountain, Anna felt lighter despite the challenges ahead. For the first time since her ordeal began, justice seemed possible. A week of preparation had transformed Anna May from a trembling victim to a woman with purpose. As she entered the Elk Creek courthouse beside Jedediah Harper, her steps were steady despite the weight of stares from townsfolk who packed the wooden benches. Judge Harrison, a stern-faced man with spectacles perched on his nose, called the proceedings to order with 3 sharp raps of his gavel. Samuel Briggs sat smugly at the plaintiff's table, his lawyer shuffling papers with theatrical importance. The attorney rose first, presenting documents with flourishes as though they were sacred texts. "These papers clearly show that Miss May's father incurred substantial debts," the lawyer announced, "which legally transferred to her upon his death. My client has merely exercised his rightful claim to her labor." Briggs nodded vigorously, his eyes narrowed when they met Anna's. She felt Jed's reassuring presence beside her as Reverend Cole leaned forward to whisper encouragement. When their turn came, Jed stood tall beside Anna, his scarred hand steady, as he presented her father's leather-bound journal to the judge. The mountain man spoke with unexpected eloquence about the discrepancies in dates and handwriting in Briggs's documents. "Your Honor," Reverend Cole added, stepping forward, "I witnessed many transactions with Anna's father. The signature on these papers bears no resemblance to his hand." The courtroom murmured as Henry Red Elk, the Ute scout whose knowledge of the territory was unquestioned, took the stand. The scout's testimony was measured and precise, describing the boundary markers of Anna's land and confirming her father's legitimate claim to the creek parcel. "I guided her father to mark those boundaries myself," Henry stated firmly. "The land is rich with silver ore. That's why it's being contested now." Judge Harrison examined the documents side by side, his brow furrowing as he compared signatures. The courtroom fell silent as he called Briggs forward, demanding he write the name of Anna's father. The overseer's hand trembled, producing a script nothing like the one on his documents. Sweat beaded on his forehead as the judge's expression darkened. "These papers are clear forgeries," Judge Harrison declared, his voice echoing through the hushed room. "The court finds in favor of Miss Anna May. Her indenture is dissolved, and all mineral rights to the creek property are restored to her as rightful heir." The gavel fell with finality. Briggs's face contorted with rage as he stormed from the courthouse, shouldering roughly past onlookers. Anna stood in stunned silence until she felt Jed's gentle touch on her elbow. "It's over," he whispered, the rare smile transforming his weathered face. "You're truly free now." For the first time since the auction block, Anna felt the full weight of oppression lift from her shoulders as townspeople approached with quiet congratulations and newfound respect. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Harrison cleared his throat. His weathered hands smoothed the pages of Anna May's father's journal one final time before he looked up, eyes sharp beneath bushy brows. "This court finds in favor of Miss Anna May. The mineral rights to the creek parcel are hereby restored to her as the rightful heir. Furthermore, the indenture papers presented by Mr. Briggs are declared fraudulent and dissolved, effective immediately." Anna's knees nearly buckled. She gripped the wooden railing before her as tears welled in her eyes. Beside her, Jedediah Harper stood tall and steady, his scarred hand coming to rest supportively on her shoulder. Samuel Briggs's face contorted with rage. "This is outrageous," he sputtered, but the judge silenced him with a stern glare. "Mr. Briggs, you would do well to leave this courthouse before I consider charges of forgery and fraud. Your reputation in Elk Creek is finished." The overseer gathered his papers with trembling hands, knocking his chair backward in his haste. The assembled townsfolk parted as he stormed out, the heavy door slamming behind him. Anna turned to Jed, unable to speak through her emotions. The mountain man's usually stoic face had softened, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "It's done," he said simply. As they moved through the courthouse, several townspeople approached with hesitant congratulations. Mrs. Peterson from the general store squeezed Anna's hand. "Your father would be proud, child." Reverend Cole embraced them both. "Justice has been served today," he said. "The Lord's work indeed." Henry Red Elk nodded respectfully as they passed. "The land speaks truth," the Ute scout said quietly. "It remembers its rightful guardian." Outside, Moses waited patiently, stomping occasionally in the cold. Jed helped Anna onto the mule before mounting behind her. The ride back to the cabin was filled with a lightness Anna had not felt in years. "I can hardly believe it," she whispered as they climbed the familiar mountain trail. "My father's land, my freedom." "You earned it," Jed replied, his deep voice rumbling against her back. "Your courage won the day." The afternoon sun bathed the mountainside in golden light as they approached the cabin. For the first time, Anna looked at the humble dwelling not as a temporary shelter, but as home. The smoke curling from the chimney, the carefully stacked firewood, the small garden plot they had begun to prepare for spring, all of it represented not just survival, but a future. As they dismounted, Anna turned to face her protector, her partner, her friend. "Thank you," she said simply, words inadequate for all she felt. Jed nodded, understanding in his eyes. Together, they had faced down injustice and won. Their shared struggle had forged something precious between them, something neither had expected to find in this harsh, beautiful wilderness. The crackling of the fire had become a comforting sound in Jedediah Harper's cabin, a warm counterpoint to the mountain chill. Anna May sat by the hearth, mending one of Jed's shirts while he cleaned his rifle nearby. Their victory over Samuel Briggs had brought a peace neither had known before. The mineral rights to her father's land were secure, and for the first time in months, Anna allowed herself to believe in tomorrow. A shadow passed the window, then another. "Jed," she whispered, her needle freezing mid-stitch. The trapper was already on his feet, moving with surprising silence for such a large man. He motioned for Anna to stay low as he peered through the window. The flicker of torches illuminated his scarred face, hardening it into a mask of grim understanding. "Briggs's men," he murmured. "Get your coat." They had barely grabbed their essentials, the journal, the Bible, a small pouch of coins, when the first torch hit the roof. Flames spread with terrifying speed across the dry timber. Jed pulled Anna through the door just as a burning branch crashed where she had been standing moments before. From the safety of the tree line, they watched their home become an inferno. The cabin that had sheltered them, where Anna had first known safety and Jed had rediscovered purpose, collapsed in on itself with a terrible groan. Moses brayed in distress from the small stable Jed had managed to open before the fire took hold. "Everything," Anna whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Everything we built." Jed's arm encircled her shoulders, solid as the mountain itself. "Not everything," he said firmly. "We still have what matters." The commotion had drawn neighbors from nearby homesteads. Will Turner arrived first, followed by the Petersons and others, their lanterns bobbing like fireflies against the darkness. They brought blankets and offers of shelter, faces grim with the understanding that this was no accident. "This is my fault," Anna said later, huddled under a borrowed quilt in the Turners' spare room. "If you had never helped me, then I would still be alone," Jed interrupted, his voice rough with emotion, "and you would be in Briggs's power. I would choose this 100 times over." "But your home can be rebuilt," he finished. "Walls and a roof don't make a home, Anna. What we found together, that can't burn." Outside, the last embers of the cabin glowed against the night sky. Anna knew Briggs had meant to destroy more than timber and possessions. He had meant to break their spirit, to punish them for daring to stand against him. But as she looked at Jedediah's determined face in the lantern light, she knew the overseer had failed. They had lost a shelter, but not their home. The morning after the fire, Anna May and Jedediah Harper made their way down the mountain path toward Elk Creek. Anna's eyes were still red from crying, her hands clutching the salvaged journal, one of the few possessions they'd managed to rescue from the flames. Jed walked beside her, his usual stoic expression masking the anger that simmered beneath the surface. "We'll get through this," he murmured, his voice barely audible above the crunch of their footsteps on the path. The town came into view, and Anna felt her stomach tighten. The last time they'd been here together had been for the trial. Now they were returning as victims, and she wasn't sure which was worse, the previous scorn or the pity they might face now. Mrs. Peterson looked up from her counter when they entered the general store, her eyes widening at their soot-stained clothing. "Heard about what happened," she said, her usual brisk manner softening. "That Briggs has gone too far this time." To Anna's surprise, the shopkeeper pulled out a bolt of blue cotton fabric. "Been saving this. Thought you might need something new to start with." The unexpected kindness brought fresh tears to Anna's eyes. While Jed negotiated for nails and tools, Sheriff Miller entered the store. The lawman cleared his throat awkwardly. "Harper," he nodded, "got some men willing to ride up tomorrow to help with rebuilding, if you'll accept it." Outside the store, they encountered Reverend Cole, who pressed a loaf of fresh bread into Anna's hands. "Martha baked extra," he explained, "and Henry Red Elk said he'd bring you a young pig from his latest litter, something to start your farm again." As they gathered supplies, more townspeople approached. Some offered lumber, others promised to help with the raising of the cabin walls. Each gesture, small or large, chipped away at the wall of isolation that had surrounded them. On the journey back up the mountain, Anna walked with a straighter spine despite her exhaustion. "They're changing," she said softly. Jed adjusted the pack of supplies on his shoulder. "You're changing them," he replied. "Your strength, your forgiveness." Anna shook her head. "We are. Together." By late afternoon, they reached the charred remains of their home. Instead of despair, Anna felt a curious sense of determination as she surveyed the blackened timbers. She set down their supplies and picked up a shovel. "Where do we start?" she asked. The trapper looked at her with something like pride in his eyes. "We clear away what's broken," he said, taking up his own tool. "Then we build something stronger." As they worked side by side, Anna realized they weren't just rebuilding shelter, but creating something the fire couldn't touch. A foundation of respect, both for themselves and within the community they'd never truly been part of until now. The courier's arrival at the half-rebuilt cabin brought unexpected news. Anna Mae's hands trembled as she unfolded the official letter bearing the Western Pacific Railroad Agency seal. Jedediah stood behind her, his presence steady and reassuring as she read aloud. "They want to purchase the mineral rights to my father's land," she whispered, hardly believing the words. "And they acknowledge me as the rightful heir." Jed's weathered face broke into a rare smile. "That's what justice looks like," he said, his voice rough with emotion. The letter promised a sum that would secure their future, enough to complete their home and establish a proper life together. Yet as evening fell and they sat before their new hearth, Anna couldn't shake the shadow of unease that crept over her hope. "Briggs won't let this go," she murmured, staring into the flames. "He's lost too much face already." The trapper nodded gravely. "We'll be ready," he promised, his scarred hand finding hers in the firelight. Their fears were confirmed the next morning. When Reverend Cole arrived at their doorstep, his expression troubled. The clergyman accepted a cup of coffee before delivering his warning. "Samuel has been making threats at the saloon," he explained. "He claims to have new documents, says he'll challenge Anna's claim publicly at Sunday service." "Another forgery," Jed growled, his fists clenching. The Reverend nodded. "Most likely. But he's desperate now, and desperate men are dangerous." Anna set down her cup with surprising steadiness. "I won't hide from him," she declared. "I've done that long enough." "The congregation will witness whatever happens," Cole assured them. "Truth has a way of revealing itself when confronted in the light." After the Reverend departed, Anna found herself standing at the edge of their property, gazing toward town. The railroad's offer represented everything she'd lost and might regain, not just wealth, but legitimacy and standing. "We could leave," Jed suggested quietly, coming to stand beside her. "Take the offer and start fresh somewhere Briggs can't reach us." Anna turned to him, studying the face that had become her sanctuary. "And let him win? Let him keep doing this to others?" She shook her head firmly. "My father taught me that running from injustice only gives it room to grow." The mountain man's eyes softened with pride. "Sunday, then," he agreed. That night, as they prepared for bed in their partially finished home, Anna felt a strange calm settle over her. Whatever came next, whether final justice or renewed struggle, she would face it standing tall, with Jedediah Harper beside her. The church fell silent as Samuel Briggs burst through the doors, his face contorted with rage. Clutching a sheaf of papers, he stormed down the aisle toward where Anna Mae and Jedediah Harper sat with the congregation. "That woman belongs to me by law," Briggs shouted, waving the documents. "I've brought new evidence of her father's debts." Anna's heart pounded, but she felt Jed's steady presence beside her. The trapper didn't flinch, his scarred hand finding hers in silent support. Reverend Cole stepped down from the pulpit, his normally gentle voice firm. Before you make such claims in God's house, Samuel, I ask you to swear before him and this community that these documents are true." The church grew impossibly quiet. Briggs's confidence wavered as the Reverend held out the Bible. "Place your hand here and swear," Reverend Cole insisted. Briggs hesitated, his gaze darting around the room. The townsfolk watched, their expressions no longer reflecting blind acceptance of his authority. Henry Red Elk stood at the back, arms crossed, his testimony about the land boundaries still fresh in everyone's minds. Briggs began, then faltered. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he looked from the Bible to Anna's unwavering gaze. "I cannot." A collective gasp rippled through the congregation. "The papers are forged," he admitted, shoulders slumping in defeat. "I wanted the mineral rights." Mrs. Peterson, who had once whispered behind Anna's back, was the first to stand. "Shame on you, Samuel Briggs." Under the weight of community judgment, Briggs signed a formal release of all claims against Anna and her property, then slunk from the church, a broken man. After the service, neighbors approached Anna and Jed with apologies and offers of help. "We'll be at your place tomorrow to finish that cabin," promised the blacksmith, who had once refused to serve them. That evening, Anna and Jed sat before the hearth of their partially rebuilt home. The walls smelled of fresh-cut pine, and a quilt, a gift from Reverend Cole's wife, lay across their new bed. "I never thought I'd belong anywhere again," Anna whispered, watching the flames dance. Jed's rough fingers gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "You belong here," he said simply. Outside, the mountains stood silent witness as neighbors' lanterns bobbed up the path, bringing food and supplies for the next day's work. Inside, the warmth of the fire couldn't match the warmth in Anna's heart. "Thank you," she said, "for that silver dollar that changed everything." Jed smiled, a rare, beautiful sight. "Best coin I ever spent." Their story, which had begun with an auction and a desperate bid for freedom, had transformed into something neither could have imagined, a testament to second chances, to mercy over vengeance, and to love found in the harshest of mountains.